Okay, so welcome to Get to Class. So we're going to talk today about cooperation using Google Meet and online learning. This will be presented by myself, Marilyn Green. I'm one of the behavior team, a behavior analyst, and Jen Nieradka. She is also one of our behavior teams. So we are going to start. So our board respectively acknowledges that we are located on the ancestral, traditional, and unceded Indigenous territory of the Algonquin peoples, on whose territory we pray, learn, play, and work. So I've already introduced ourselves. So in order to attend this webinar, some of the prerequisites were our ABA in Your Home series, which went through instructional control. And there was a corresponding worksheet that went with these series. So as you'll see throughout our webinar today, we're going to follow those questions along so that if you have those worksheets filled out, that's great. You can have it along with you. If not, you can still participate in today's webinar and you can possibly go back and do those later because that information will be relevant to today's webinar as well. So our topic today is going to be going to class. So this is a virtual model of going to class. So first we're going to address why it might be so challenging for your child, the differences between the two models. And then next what we're going to do is go through the ABA in Your Home worksheet for 3 different case studies. So we're going to talk about holding the key, so the reinforcement aspect, picking what fits, choosing your goal, scheduling for success, so how you schedule this into your daily schedule, setting the stage for success, so what materials and what things will you need to be successful in this situation, and then putting it all together, so building yourself a plan. We hope that throughout you will find the case studies, there might be different aspects of different case studies that will apply to your situation, and you'll find those little tidbits and bring them all together to form your own plan.
Okay, so thank you, Marilyn. First, we're going to start with what makes in-class learning so successful. So the first thing is social reinforcement. So it's that immediate feedback from the teacher and the peers that your child gets when they're communicating, collaborating, and learning. The learning process itself provides a lot of social reinforcement. It also provides, so for an example of that is the praise from the teacher or acknowledgement for completing part of the work. Also, tangible reinforcement happens at high rates in most classrooms. So high fives, dojo points, different types of reward systems, as well as a lot of social praise and feedback from the educators. Another reason why in-class learning is so successful is that there are a lot of environmental cues for learning. So for example, students already have the expectation when they walk into a school building that that's where learning is going to happen. When they walk into the classroom, there are cues on the walls that are supporting their learning in terms of word walls and different supports for learning, so that the students sit down and they already know that their learning materials are signaling that this is a learning environment. And classrooms are set up with fewer distractions than at home. There aren't TVs and iPads with their favorite YouTube videos ready to go at the end of their fingertips. So the environmental cues in a classroom certainly set the stage for a tone of learning for students. Individualized support. So there's small group instruction that happens in the classroom. There's also one-to-one instruction when the teacher is walking around or pulling students aside to work on specific things. So they have that immediate learning support in a typical classroom when they're physically there. Another reason why in-class learning is so successful is because of choral responding. An example of that is group responding. So when the teacher is going over algebra, the repetition in that and getting the whole group to respond or answer the question together or raise their hand, that really feeds into a supportive learning environment for students that feeds into real collaboration and learning. So that choral responding for younger grades, it could be something like the teacher saying, today is Monday, August 10th, 2020, say it with me, and then the whole class responds. So that kind of interactive learning is typical in classrooms of all different grades. And so that is something that's very tangible for students when they're learning. Also, in-class learning there's very predictable breaks. Recess is at the same time every day. Snack time's at the same time every day. They can predict when their favorite subject is coming up next, or when breaks are coming within subjects. Teachers will often say something like, let's do the 5 questions and then we'll stand up and take a body break, or things like that. And students fall into behavioral patterns with these breaks where they may go to first period science class on a regular basis and always kind of fill up their water bottle first, or leave 5 minutes early to go to the bathroom or go back to their locker or something like that. So those behavioral patterns become very predictable and reliable for students to follow. So that kind of gives you a snapshot of why in-class learning is so successful. And now we're going to talk about, well, how can we in general set up virtual learning for success? So we will go into case studies, like Marilyn said, where we're getting more specific to a profile of a specific child. But some general examples here. For social reinforcement, we want to ensure that if your child is learning from home, that they have socialization opportunities outside that class time. So playtime with peers, it can be virtual dates or play dates, but something in person works even better. And that you're giving them a lot of feedback. So a lot of feedback that we've received from parents is that in the spring, when they were trying to get their child to attend an online learning session or a Google Meet, one of the things that was going wrong was they were having their child attend and then they were leaving. And so, you know, being there to support the follow-up work through Hapara or different methods is really important, so that you're giving your child that social reinforcement they need to keep going and stay on task and know that they're doing the right thing. And that really is sometimes regardless of age. Some much older students sometimes need that constant feedback as well. So tangible reinforcement. So you can set up tangible reinforcers that won't compete with learning. So we talk about putting together a token board. It doesn't have to be fancy. You can just grab a piece of paper and say, today, if you ask 5 really good questions during your Google Meet, I will write a check mark every time you ask a question, or at least raise your hand for an opportunity to respond, even if you're not chosen. And when you get 5 after your Google Meet, you can grab the iPad, or we can take a bike ride, something like that. So setting up real tangible reinforcement for your child to help facilitate their interest and maintenance staying online. So environmental cues for learning. So setting up the online learning in the same location in the house every day. So for a lot of us, that was our dining room table. But if you're choosing online learning, or by happenstance you end up in online learning, then having one location in your house where you can facilitate that your child will get to know that when I'm sitting here, the environmental cues are that I'm learning, my laptop's plugged in here, my pad of paper's here, my learning materials are here, so that, you know, it's always in the same place and it's very familiar. So we can try to replicate some of those environmental cues for learning. So individualized support. So staying close by can really help monitor that learning and sitting with your younger children. So a lot of feedback that I had, certainly that was the case with my youngest, was you know, a lot of fear around being on the video and, you know, answering questions and being part of the online learning. So sitting with her really helped resolve a lot of that. And with my older daughter, really sitting close by so I could monitor her learning and answer her questions as needed to give her the individualized support as she moved through her learning modules. So choral responding or group repetition, this is really important. So asking your child to recite what they've just learned, or describe to you the concepts that were part of that module of online learning, it can be very important to, again, try to replicate some of the success that happens in the classroom. And educators will be doing this online anyway, right? So they will be using a lot of the same tricks and tips they use in the classroom as much as possible, transferring it into an online learning module. But you as a parent can help facilitate that by further asking your child to go into detail about what they just learned. And then predictable breaks. Again, it's really, really important to set that up within your day. So during the online learning experience, you can set up breaks that become predictable for your child. And for younger kids, a visual schedule with a picture on it might indicate what's coming next and when the breaks are coming. For older kids, you can just write it out on a piece of paper. It doesn't have to be something fancy, just to give them a sense of, you know, how long things are going to last and when they're going to get a break and what type of break they're going to get.
Okay, so next one, oh, sorry, Jen, I cut you off. It's your turn still.
That's okay. So what not to do when you're getting your child to class. So some of us made some of these mistakes early on. We don't want to limit all access to preferred items. We don't want to say, listen, you're not getting anything awesome until after 5 p.m. or something like that. That's not going to go well. That might evoke some problem behavior. We don't want to be threatening to remove or throw out preferred items as a punishment for certain behavior. So if your child is not attending to the teacher, or they're getting distracted, they're off task, they might be being silly, we don't want to start making threats or removing things as a punishment for that. There are much better ways to facilitate cooperation from your child. Expecting independent learning from the start. So this is, again, something that we heard a lot of feedback about. Parents were saying, well, I set them up the computer and then I had to go. So I kind of just came back an hour later to realize they weren't logged on anymore, something like that, or they had gone to get a snack, or they were playing with their toys. So we really want to make sure that we're not expecting something that's unrealistic of our child, and we all know our children the best in terms of how long they can realistically stay at something, especially at the start. More support at the start, and then fading yourself out is always more highly recommended than trying to go for the bigger goal from the start. We don't want you to expect children to sit for long periods of time to complete their homework. You know, we all heard stories of like 2 hours later, I let them get up off the chair. So in classrooms, not every parent realizes, but children don't sit for 2 hours at a time in the classroom. They get up a lot. There's a lot of group work. There's a lot of collaboration. They're up, they're stretching, they're moving around quite a bit. They're going to get supplies. All of those kind of things are happening. They're allowed, they're encouraged. So try not to expect really long periods of time. And transitioning from your most preferred activity to an online class. We do not recommend this because most of us would have challenging behavior to some degree if we had to leave our most preferred item or activity in order to go to school or go to class. So if your child's favorite thing is to play a video game, having that video game happen right before you say, okay, shut it off, it's time to go to log on to see your teacher, that's not going to go as well as if you plan something that's a lower preferred activity right before online class starts.
Okay, now it's actually my turn. So what we're going to do now is go through 3 sample case studies. So we have Xavier, who is 6 years old, Lei, who is 10 years old, and Emad, who's 16 years old. And we're going to go through and tell you a little bit about what their profile might look like and what we would help do with them to get them to class a little bit easier. So if you were watching the videos, what we did was put a video 1 in the corner so you'll be able to follow through with the worksheet. So the first couple questions asked in this worksheet for Xavier were, what were some of his favorite things? So if we have a 6-year-old child who loves Zoo Crew, he loves dinosaurs, he loves Roblox, airplane rides with parents, that's what we're going to start with. What are his favorite things? And then the next question was, how can we start to withhold those reinforcers? So what we could do is we could place a password on the TV for Netflix so that we're the ones who deliver that password. We are the ones in charge of giving it to him. So it's not a matter of withholding of how can we take it away, it's how can we be the giver of these things. Having some new novel dino toys or Roblox tucked aside that you can be the one to provide them with him, to him so that he's getting new toys and they're a little bit more exciting than the ones he might have played with a little bit before. Or reserving those airplane rides with dad because he gives the best ones for a little bit later after your reward. So these things will still be given on a regular basis. They're just not free access anymore. They're going to be used to help reward some of these behaviors that we want to start seeing. The next question is how can we start to reduce some of our adult expectations? Sometimes when we look at the goals, what we see is the end goal is a really great goal, but maybe we have to start reducing some of our expectations currently, Or maybe sometimes the end goal is something that typical 6-year-olds just don't do. And like Jen mentioned, typical grade 1 6-year-olds do not sit for very long in class. They do not sit without, constant engagement from their peers, from other people. So if he was currently attending online class, but he will not engage with his peers or his teachers. So we want to reduce that expectation from completely attending class and completely attending the whole time to small little goals at a time. And then how can we build in some preferences throughout the day? Because especially when they are in an in-school model, they have preferences built out throughout the day through recess, through gym, all kinds of fun library time. There's lots of really great things going on during the day. So could we schedule zoo crew times throughout the day? Could we have some worksheets or some activities that were maybe academic based, but around dinosaurs and Roblox? For video 2, the next thing that we start to talk about is let's talk about what's going really well right now. So for Xavier, what's going really well is that he has class daily for 30 minutes and he'll cooperate. He'll happily go and sit in front of the class and log in. So that's a really great start for them. What's not going so well is that when he's there, he's focusing on other things than the teacher. So he's like, oh, look, a dog walked by. Oh, look, did you see my sister's over there doing cartwheels? It's really hard to attend to the actual class. And that's where Jen was talking about really minimizing some of those distractions, because I want to watch that too, right? It's very difficult to not be engaged with the person who's teaching when there's a lot of distractions around. And so the final part of video 2 was how to pick that goal. And picking a goal is something that fits for you and your family. So no two goals will look the same, and they're not comparable either, because every child has their own strengths, their own needs, and every family has their own capability of putting a goal in place. So for Xavier, we chose something like he will answer 3 questions from the teacher each class. So that's our end goal for right now. And then what we're going to do is start to break that down. So when we're scheduling for success, this video was done in order to help you determine where can you put that goal in place during your day right now. So the part of their schedule that's going really well for Xavier is that he goes when it's scheduled. So it's possible that they could schedule it multiple times a day, or it could be at different times, but we just have to pick a consistent one. And how can they build more consistency in? So they want to have the same time for homework or classwork each and every day, so that at 9 o'clock, it's class time. Just like at 8:45, you get on the bus, and then at 9 o'clock, school starts. You want to make sure that it's really consistent. Because if it's a different time every day, what's going to often happen is he's like, well, yesterday we didn't do it till 2, so why can I do it today at 10? We want to make sure that it's consistent every day, that he knows at 10 o'clock, it's class. And again, that time could look different for every family depending on your schedule as well. So how can you communicate with this? Well, because Xavier's 6, he might be just at his learning, beginning to read. So we would use some visuals here for him. So some pictures, or you can put the word on it with it. And what we want to do is we want to build in a neutral activity before he has class. So we don't want to go from Roblox, which we know is one of his preferred, or ask him to shut off Zoo Crew, and then go right into class. What we want to do is say, okay, Zoo Crew's done. Let's play with some Play-Doh. So that's a neutral activity. And again, that neutral activity will look different for every child, but something that's fun, but not really hard to give up. Then he's going to go to his academic online class, and then he's going to have one of those preferred things from video 1. So the Zoo Crew, the Roblox. So we want to put those after the class instead of having to transition from something really fun to class, which can be a challenge. So when we're setting the stage for success for Xavier, what we want to do is we want to start to look at what skills does he already have that he's using that we can build on those skills. And so what we know is he's very cooperative, and he'll comply with most of the things his parents ask him to do. So it's more of a focus issue for him. It's not really that he won't go when he's asked, it's just when he's there, he's not paying very much attention. So this is one of the challenges you could have for going to classes. I'm happy to go, but it's difficult for me to focus when I'm there. So a baby step for him might be just, let's answer one question at the beginning of class. And that could simply say, the teacher says, hey, everybody, this is what I did this weekend. Tell me what you did this weekend. And then we turn to Xavier and we say, what did the teacher do this weekend? And he's like, she went skiing. And we're like, yeah, great. So he's already focused long enough to hear enough information to answer that one question. Baby steps, start there, and then he can access some reinforcement up. So how can we do that? Well, sometimes we could arrange that with the teacher, maybe sending an email like, is there a quick question she could ask him sometimes rather than us always having to ask it, so he's actually attending to the teacher as well. And then delivering him a preferred item for the rest. So he could hold a little dino and still watch, because we already know that he's happy to be in class, but maybe he's got something to do while he's in class while he's listening. And then we're going to build up the amount of questions that he can answer, therefore the amount of time he has to focus before he accesses reinforcement. So when we start to put him all together, what we have is a long-term goal of answering 3 questions from the teacher each class. What we want to do is we want him to sign into the class, start by answering 1 question within the first 5 minutes, because it's easiest to answer that question in the first 5 minutes. You're going to lose focus the longer you're there likely. After 5 consecutive days that he's answering these questions, then what we want to do is start to move up those goals. So once he's answered 1 question for 5 days, then can we do 2 questions at random? So maybe 1 in the beginning and 1 midway through class. And then what we want to do is eventually, after those 5 days of success, can we get him to ask the teacher a question so that he's actually processing the information enough that he's now asking a question. And this doesn't mean that we can't help him with those questions, give him some ideas, but what we really want him to be doing is focusing long enough that he has a question for the teacher. And how can we do this? Well, creating a visual schedule for him. There's a neutral activity, so he hasn't just had his preferred thing. He goes to class and he's deprived. He wants that really amazing thing, and then all he has to do is answer those couple questions and then he can access it. So we're building in that reward for him. So that's what we would do for Xavier, and a student who has more of an issue with focusing than actually attending the class in the first place. So Jem's going to talk about Lei here. Can you see it, Jen? Oh, I think we're having a bit of a technical issue, so maybe I'll start with Lei for a minute. Am I getting?
Okay, I think I'm back.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Okay, sorry, I couldn't unmute myself there for a second. So now I'm ready to go. So let's talk about Lei. In video 1, we really set the stage for figuring out what are your kiddos' all-time favorite things and how to make sure our expectations are set up for success. So the favorite things for Lei are Harry Potter books. She loves Jell-O, she loves bike rides, she likes Beanie Babies. So most kids have a lot. You could list 20 things that they like, so you can pick sort of the top few favorites. How do we withhold those top reinforcers? So typically when Lei wakes up, she has all of her books there, she's got her Beanie Babies, she can go bike riding anytime. We want to start being the giver of those good things. So be the one to make the Jell-Os with her. So like, let's make Jell-O together, instead of already having it made in the fridge. Set times for bike rides rather than free access. Again, we want to make sure these preferred activities are scheduled strategically throughout the day as opposed to always available, because we don't want to set ourselves up for she's out for a bike ride, she comes back and it's time to log on. Reducing adult expectations. So currently Lei attends class, but she's acting silly with her peers and she's being disruptive. So Lei is the student in the class where the teacher's saying, Lei, please mute your microphone a lot, or Lei, please don't write that in the chat box, that's not appropriate. So maybe Lei is just getting off task a lot, and so that just speaks to another, probably one of her top preferred things is that social reinforcement, going for the laugh. She's a bit of a jokester, getting off task there. So building in preferences throughout the day, we might say, you know what, let's do a Harry Potter movie marathon. We're going to schedule in when we're watching components of those movies or those entire movies, and doing that together when it's scheduled, and maybe with some Jell-O or some favorite popcorn or treats. Schedule bike rides with friends and family, have some fun Jell-O colors and molds that we can do together, and Harry Potter stickers, activities, and trivia. All of those things we want to build in strategically throughout their day. And this oftentimes overwhelms parents because it's more planning on the front end. But believe me when I say you will reap the rewards together with Lei when you do it this way, because not only will her in-class behaviors change, but when things are a little bit more structured, then you'll see that the whole day can run much more smoothly. So in video 2, that was pick what fits. That was talking about the goals, right? So what's going well? Well, right now, Lei will attend class with little to no prompting. All you have to do is tell her it's class time, and she's like, okay. Part of the reason is because that social reinforcement is very high for her. She wants to go to class and get people laughing, right? So what isn't going so well is she only wants to speak to her peers, make silly faces when she sees them, and that's really disruptive to the online learning and can be stressful for you as a parent because you're trying to get in there and mute them real quick before they can be disruptive. And it can be very stressful for the educator who's trying to get Lei to cooperate and try to get everybody back on task. So pick a goal as a family. So like Marilyn said, you're going to pick a bigger goal, and we're going to break it down in a moment. So Lei will attend class without making silly faces or writing silly messages in the chat. So that's the end goal. But of course, when we use applied behavior analysis to change behavior, we have to break it down into smaller sub goals and work systematically towards that goal. Because what will happen naturally as a parent when you're trying to reach a big goal, like she can't make any silly faces and she can't write any silly messages, is sometimes you naturally go to punishment. So you might say to Lei, if you do those things, then you're going to lose Harry Potter and you're going to lose everything. And that's not really effective at teaching Lei replacement behaviors, with teaching her delayed reinforcement. So delaying those immediate needs for that social reinforcement. So what we want to do is take a really strategic ABA approach here so that we get her to that goal without needing to use any kind of threats or punishment. So in video 3, we talked about scheduling for success. So what areas of our daily schedule are working well? So Lei will do her academic work independently, and she has some peer interactions throughout her day already, maybe with some neighborhood kids, a neighbor, a sibling, something like that. So that's really awesome. And that's super important to acknowledge as a family at this part of your worksheet, what's going well and how can we use that to our advantage. How can we build more structure and consistency into our family daily routine? So build in daily peer interactions after schoolwork. So what we want to do is systematically set up maybe like a Harry Potter club with the neighbor, and they meet every day as soon as school online learning is finished, so that there's a high reinforcer, but it's tying into that social reinforcement that Lei really wants and that she finds very valuable. How can I communicate the new schedule with my child? So you can have a weekly calendar with play dates listed. There's a variety of different ways you can do it. And I would recommend building this with Lei. You can print off some pretty cool Harry Potter based ones that are weekly calendars, things like that, where you can build in virtual meets with friends, in-person meets with friends, things like that, to really play into some of her strengths and her preferences. Thank you, Marilyn. So video 4 is setting the stage for success. So in this video, we learned a lot about how to do that, and we asked 3 main questions. What skills does my child have now that might help us build toward the goal? She's very socially motivated. She's friendly and outgoing. So we don't want to squash that. We don't want to change who Lei is and make her not want to be around people and not want to have fun and be outgoing and be silly. Of course, we want that for her. That's one of her strengths. How do we use that to our advantage, though, to make it a little bit more appropriate and get the most out of her online learning experience? What baby steps might we take? So maybe Lei will write a question for the teacher in the chat box. Maybe you can work with her to decide on that ahead of time. Parent will sit beside Lei for the whole class to monitor. So you might say that's a lot to sit for a 1-hour class, or maybe multiple 1-hour classes in a day. But really, we want to be successful. We know Lei is less likely to engage in those problematic behaviors if you're sitting beside her. And it's not because of a threat of punishment or a threat of getting in trouble in any way. It's just because most of us act differently when our parent or supervisor is nearby. And so we want to use that to our advantage. It's very similar to in a classroom when there's 2 students chit-chatting while the teacher's reading aloud. The teacher doesn't need to stop reading aloud and address it. She just kind of walks over very subtly and stands beside their desk, and they will be quiet. So that's kind of what you're doing. And if you're working from home or you're busy, you can be sitting with your computer beside Lei at her workstation. And sometimes that proximity is enough to give her the cue that we're not going to engage in that behavior today. But working with her maybe ahead of time, what is the one question you're going to ask the teacher? Get ready to write it in the chat box, because we want her right away at the beginning of class to get that social reinforcement, asking an appropriate question. You're reinforcing her, good job, sweetie, that's what I'm talking about, buddy, you got it. The teacher's going to answer the question, so she's going to get that reinforcement right away. And she's going to go, oh yeah, there's an alternative behavior I can do here that gives me some social reinforcement from multiple different people, which is great. How can I implement one small step and reinforce completion of that step? So talk to Lei about these goals, explain how more social time will be built into her day, and work with her to collaborate on the plan. So we always would recommend this with all students, is as much as you can, collaborate directly with your child. I want you to be in contact with your friends, honey. I know virtual learning is hard. What are the things you want to do? And you can pitch some ideas. There's a Harry Potter book club. We can create a puzzle group. We can, there's all these different things that we can do. So let's talk about that. We can go bike riding. We can call someone's parent and do it every day at 11 or whatever. So having her be part of that is really important. Okay, so now let's put it all together for Lei as we did in video 5. So the end goal is Lei will attend class without making silly faces or writing silly messages in the chat. So the goal is 0 silly faces and 0 silly messages, okay? But we know we have to take baby steps. So first, Lei is going to write a question to the teacher in the chat box and have a parent sit with her in the class. And we can fade out the parent. So don't panic if you have a Lei and you're thinking, oh, I have to sit with her during every lesson all day, because that's really difficult for me to manage. Building it in at the beginning and fading yourself out as she's more successful in learning those replacement behaviors of how to appropriately engage, that's better. After 5 consecutive days of success, move up to the next goal. So you're starting with one question to the teacher. Now maybe you're making an appropriate comment to a peer. So after 5 days of success, you're going to say to Lei, okay, not only do I want you to ask a question of the teacher, now when a peer makes a really great comment, I want you to say, that's a good point, or something to that effect to your peer, because that is going to get her that social reinforcement as well. And then of course we have to fade the parent out for 5 minutes. So once she's on a roll and you're thinking, you know what, she's been so great, she's not doing silly things, I'm gonna get up and go make a tea and come back and then check in. And then it can be more of a check-in, but you don't wanna do that too fast, and you certainly don't wanna start there, because if she's developed the habit of these silly things, then we don't wanna move her too quickly or she won't be successful. So the schedule, so having the weekly calendar with play dates, different group activities. So it could even be get up, get dressed, you have breakfast, class time. So class time often falls very nicely after a snack, okay, because it's not a super highly preferred. It's not my favorite thing, and snack kind of has a natural end to it. So if you have breakfast for 15 minutes and then you roll into class time, that's an easy neutral activity to do before you roll into class time, as opposed to her going out on her bike or starting to read a new chapter of her Harry Potter book. And then maybe right after class, she's got a Zoom date with Judy, her best friend, okay? And so maybe they're gonna chat and hang out and they can be silly together and do all those things that kids love to do. And then maybe an outdoor bike ride with a friend. So that's kind of Lei in a nutshell. And then Marilyn's gonna take you through our last case study.
All right, so we're going to talk about Emad now. So now we're getting more into the teen years. So we have a 16-year-old. So for him, some of his favorite things were Xbox and Snapchat and probably TikTok and skateboarding and playing drums and practicing driving. So we're looking at some different reinforcers here that may be a little bit more challenging to control, and we see that. So for your Xbox and Snapchat and all your social media, you can change the Wi-Fi password daily. And again, this isn't in a punitive way. It's just, guess what? In the morning, as soon as you do this quick thing that I asked you to do, I'm going to give you the new Wi-Fi password. And again, sitting down and collaborating with them during this point so that they don't feel in the morning kind of attacked, like I can't get on Wi-Fi, that they know this is coming and that there's a simple task to do before accessing that. Scheduling no sound restriction drum time. So maybe he has a drum set and you're like, you know what? You can play at these times, but then between this time and this time, it's a quiet, no drum time. So that you're the one to deliver, you know what, go play with your drums now, because it's not our silent no drum time. We want to be the ones able to deliver these things to him. And the same with practicing driving. You would have to, at this point, practice with him. So we would be the deliverer of the practice, which he enjoys doing. So when we're reducing our adult expectation, our current expectation is that, or our expectation is for him to attend class, but he's not attending class at all right now. So what we really want to do is break that down, because we know that going from no class to full online learning is likely not going to happen very successfully. So how can we build in some of those preferences throughout the day? So can he have social skateboarding time with his friends? Can he take drum lessons or have practice with someone that is knowledgeable in drums? Can we build in some practice driving times with him? What we want to do is make sure that there's times throughout the day that he has fun social activities that he's already engaged in, so that it will get him more likely to be up, moving, and doing things, and we can use those to our advantage to reward the behavior we want to see. So when we're looking at what's going well, he's following the social distancing rules really well. So he has not currently been out with his friends, in large groups or anything. He's been doing a lot of Zoom. He's been doing a lot of Xbox, Snapchat. So he's on a lot of tech right now because that's his social interaction. But what's not going well is he's not going to class, and he's spending most of his time videoing with his friends or video gaming online with his friends. So that's his social interaction, and he's doing that a lot. And as we know, teenagers spend a lot of time with their friends, which is healthy, but he's kind of turned that into, that's all I do online all day. So how do you pick a goal for the family? Well, your goal might be as simple as he'll attend class for the full duration of class, but that's really, really big, right? So again, how can we break that down? That's a great goal and we want to get there, but we're going to have smaller steps first. Oops. So the areas that are working really well is he's a really good driver and he enjoys practicing driving, and he's open to that feedback while driving. So we know that he's open to learning something new and getting the feedback while learning, and we can use that to our advantage as well. And how can we build in some more consistency throughout our day and into the family routine? Well, can we create an area in the house for him that's a desk, right? So not your room. I mean, maybe it's in your room, but a special area in your room that's not just kind of sitting at the table. There's a special area where his computer stays. He's got his materials that he needs. He's got his schedule, and he's got anything that he needs for learning, his textbooks, whatever that might be, so that he really knows when, I know Jen smiled, this textbook's not a thing anymore. So that he knows when I'm at this area, this is my learning area, and it's not for gaming and it's not for my Snapchat, this is my learning area. And then how can you communicate with him this schedule? So especially the older they get, the more you really want to make sure that this is a collaborative process. We don't want to sneak up on them and say, this is what we're doing now. We want to sit down with them. They're more likely to comply with it if they're engaged in building that new schedule. So help him place reminders on his phone so he knows when you get a social interaction, when you get class time. Hey, you have drum lessons at 3, let's put that in your schedule. He'll get a little notification on his phone. It's super natural, and it's something that he's already looking at and engaged in, so it's not some new schedule that he has to now see. And he'll likely be more engaged in putting something on his phone than having to carry around a schedule with him. And then, so how are we going to schedule for success? So what does the skills he has now that are going to help build towards the new goal of going to class? So he's willing to communicate with his parents. When parents sit down and chat with him, he's open and willing to have that conversation. So that's a really good starting point. If you're not at that point, then you might want to, start seeking some external help if you can't even communicate with them at this point right now, because right now this is a child who's willing to sit down and talk about it. What step might be that we could break it down into a next step to get to our bigger goal is having him log on and stay on for 10 minutes. Something low, something small, regardless of the length of his class, just starting with a 10-minute goal. And he can choose to stay in class for longer, because we know that sometimes he would be more likely to stay in a little bit longer if something engaging is happening or if he gets wrapped up in it. If he chose that, then he can access more driving practice. So there's an additional reward for choosing to do something longer versus his other rewards for just going to class for 10 minutes. If he chooses a little bit longer, he can access extra driving. And right now, I would reinforce even 2 to 3 minutes longer, because it's still a couple minutes longer every day. And so how can you implement this and reinforce it? Well, once he's attended the 10 minutes, he can log off at this point. And, you know, it seems kind of counterintuitive to say, well, you can tell him to be out of class, but previously he wasn't in class at all. So every 10 minutes is going to be 10 minutes more than he was in before. And again, we're always going to build on that goal. So it's not going to be 10 minutes forever. But what we want to say is, you did what you said you would do, you can log off now, your choice. If you choose to stay a little bit longer, driving practice, awesome, but you don't have to. So it's not a matter of you really, really should stay on longer. It's just, it's a choice for him to make at this point. So how do we wrap that up and put it all together? So his goal is he'll attend online class for the full duration of the class. Great, where do we start? So he will log on and attend class for the first 10 minutes before logging off and going back to his gaming or back to his social media. We're going to slowly build up that. And this is called forward chaining when we're using applied behavior analysis. So he's using the gaming as an immediate reward for completing that 10 minutes. After he's successful for 5 days of staying on for 10 minutes, or hopefully more, then we're going to move it up by 10 more minutes. So after every time he's on for 10 minutes, then he's on for 20 minutes and he accesses his reward. Then he's on for 30 minutes and he accesses his reward. If he chooses to stay in longer, then he can have 5 extra minutes equals 5 extra minutes in class equals 5 extra minutes of driving. We're going to reward him accordingly. And again, for the self-management of this, we really want to put this a little bit on him. We want to get him self-managing. No one's going to be managing a schedule for him in high school. So what we want is him to start to learn to, oh, it's my notifications on. I have class in 5 minutes. I got to get to that learning area where I'm supposed to be. I have to log on. I have to have all my materials ready. And you can put all those notifications in the phone. So 5 minutes before class, get your computer, get your charger, and get your book, whatever you need. And then you can schedule driving at 7 p.m. every day, and so that he can earn that time, and he knows that every day at 7, if I've earned it, that's when I go. And so he can predict when he's going to get that extra schedule every day. And once the driving starts a little bit and he accesses a little bit reward, then he's more likely to want to access more and more of it. Okay.
So as you can see, we had 3 different students that we needed to get to class, and they all followed basically the same steps, although their plans looked very highly individualized and different. So we had to choose an end goal. We had to break that goal into mini steps and figure out where to start. We had to withhold reinforcement and strategically put it in, as opposed to a free-for-all. A lot of kiddos with troubles with online learning, it's because they have so many competing reinforcers that they have free access to, and no one's holding the key, right? So they can, you know, so they're really competing. Do I want to do all this fun stuff and basically be in Disney World, or do I want to go on class? Even when class is super engaging and there's wonderful things happening in the class, it's super hard to get them to break that. So we also want to set up the environment to signal that learning is going to be happening here, similar to that environmental cues that when they walk into the school, learning is what's associated with being in that environment. We want to teach the current step and reinforce it because we know what they love and we have to use it to our advantage. And repeat steps 3 to 5. So keep going. So, you know, keep moving up the time frame and work with your child's educator. So whoever is their teacher, or if they have multiple online teachers, or whoever it's going to look, make sure you're collaborating with them ahead of time and say, hey, listen, this is our big family goal. This is our issue with the virtual learning. This is what we're going to tackle. So you could see that all 3 case studies had very different goals. 2 were willing to go to class. 1 was not attending at all. 1 was attending but being really silly and disruptive, and 1 was not even willing to go at all. And so hopefully in some of those case studies you were able to pull from that and see your own circumstance and your own child in there. And if not now, maybe you will later on. So thank you so much for attending today. We've had a lot of fun this evening, and we had a lot of fun putting this together with our case studies. Some of these students may or may not be based on our own children and the procedures that are tried, tested, and true from our own experiences in the spring. And so we really appreciate you joining us. And we are going to stop the recording, and then we're going to stick around for some questions.